Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm actually honored to be part of this whole series. This is the launch of a series of talks that will be hosted by Uber. So that's just the inaugural panel. Ignite is the name of the series. The aim here actually is to share, discuss, reflect on this new world that we're living in. Uh, I think everybody will agree with me. The world has never been challenged in its modern times as it is today. However, you look on things, safety will be always an issue. Safety will be always a concern. Be it the first days of the age of autonomous driving, be it being uh, be it automated and AI managed transportation, mass transportation of goods, or even the hard days of the COVID-19, safety will be always the concern. Our lives has changed a great deal. Our lives, actually, the example is what we're doing right now, meeting from different cities in the world, uh, through our home offices, through our living rooms. And Uber is helping us do that. Uber will be helping us to address such an important aspect of the change, which is safety. Tech for Transport Safety is the name of today's inaugural panel discussion. I will be joined now by a group of remarkable experts in the fields, distinguished guests who will help answer so many questions that I only have 1 hour to go asking those questions. And then we'll have a second hour, but the second hour will not be mine. It will be for the general public audience who are joining us right now. The general public audience are welcomed and encouraged to add remarks, ask questions. They can do that through the second hour of the event. For anybody who prefers to follow the discussion in Arabic, he can do that through the Arabic version of the website. Let me start by welcoming our distinguished participants and guests today. I will be using the alphabetic order with one exception, a ladies first exception for Rebecca Payne. Rebecca Payne is the Senior Product Manager on the Safety and Insurance team at Uber. Ali Al-Atrash, he's joining us like me from Cairo. Ali is the co-founder and COO of Trella. Great to see you, Ali. I would like to welcome Gary West, the Managing Director of Onstar Middle East and Future Mobility at General Motors Africa and the Middle East. Harj Dhaliwal, please forgive me if there was any wrong pronunciation, but it's great to have you. He's the Managing Director of Virgin Hyperloop. Great to see you, Harj. And joining us as well is Carl Jean-Bart. He is the CEO and co-founder of Dirk. And last but not least, Mr. Naif bin Houail. He's the General Manager of Safety and Services Monitoring at the Saudi Transportation General Authority. Great to have you all here. I would like to start with a couple of questions. It will be introductory questions. I will be always speaking to you and having in mind what questions that might pop in mind of the general public audience that will be joining us as well. Rebecca, I would like to start with you actually. Why are we here? What do you think is the aim of such a series, the Ignite series of talks?
Yeah, well, I think at the most basic level, we know that collisions are mostly preventable, and that's why we even take care at Uber not to call them accidents. So every injury or death that happens as a result of the crash is entirely preventable, and we need to be working towards reducing those tragic statistics. But no one company or one government is going to be able to solve this on their own. So you'll see from this panel, I think, that we're all working to address safety in very different ways, but we can all learn from each other, and that's why we wanted to encourage this collaborative discussion so that we can find tangible solutions to move forward, and even beyond this panel to the audience as well, to highlight the work needed to maximize the potential of current technology and just create a safer future for all across the region and across the world as well. So I think it's a very important discussion to have, and we're all going to learn from each other as we go.
Oh, great. Carl, I'm new to your field. I'm just a media guy, and I want to know what DERC is all about. What would DERC, and how would it influence me and the general audience who are right now joining us?
Yes, of course, and thanks for the question. DERC is a company that's transforming infrastructure for road safety, to improve road safety, improve mobility, and we really are developing AI models, leveraging 5G and IoT technologies to be able to extract as much intelligence from road sensors in real time and feed that information back into the ecosystem. And what this does is enable better understanding, better insights into safety issues, safety concerns, hazards, as well as real-time alerts. And this is a key thesis to enable autonomy at level 4, level 5 stages, where we can now create an integrated ecosystem where the autonomous car is not just functioning as a standalone entity. It's also communicating with its surrounding and communicating with the surrounding infrastructure. So this is really how we're contributing today by providing data and providing intelligence, as well as that real-time perception for autonomy.
Ali, not everybody here is going to understand me, so I have to explain my question first. Your company's name is Trilla. Our Egyptian culture links between this name. It's the name of the big, huge truck moving merchandise and goods everywhere in Egypt, and actually it refers, in our perception, to a life-threatening situation. Most of accidents or collisions, as Rebecca just called it, most of it usually has a trilla, a huge truck involved one way or the other. How did you and your company, actually, why did you choose this name? One of the main issues or challenges that you have to face is changing our mindset from trilla being risk and life-threatening situations to safety.
100%. That's a very good question. But before that, I want to say thank you, and I'm happy to be here. And I'm also an Uber alum, so I'm excited to see what we're doing these Ignite series. So I think for the audience that doesn't know much about Trella, so we're a trucking marketplace, and we connect carriers and shippers. We were founded and based in Egypt, but we're targeting Middle East and Africa. And over the past year, we've went from Egypt to Saudi and Pakistan, and then soon the rest of the GCC. So I think just one step back and into your question. So I 100% agree, and I think it is quite unfortunate that this is the rep that this industry has got. And I think we're definitely aware, one of the reasons why we started this company, and if you look back at our founding white paper before we even started the company, we had safety as a key highlighted pillar that we wanted to alleviate throughout our society and the countries that we operate in. And if you want to think about why it's associated to death or safety-related incidents, it's simple, right? So 9 out of the 10 things you see around you have been moved in a truck type. So basically, the entire GDP's worth of goods has been moved in a heavy truck. So it goes hand in hand with accidents, given the size and the mass of it. And just, the numbers are not great, right? So unfortunately, 10% of the deaths that occur on the road are caused by some of these heavy trucks across Egypt, GCC, and Pakistan. And the impact is massive. So it's just 6% of the accidents cause 10% of the deaths. So it's not obviously great. And then in the GCC, it costs over $8 billion per year on accidents and injuries. So, and even though it's less than 10% of the total road safety related accidents, we just have to start thinking about why this happens and why that's common. And it starts with the fact that these drivers drive for super long hours. They drive for 8, 10, 12, sometimes 16 hours straight. And some of them are unfortunately under the influence of drugs. And then the other reason is the lack of enforcement on the truck quality. So you have some trucks that are driving that in Europe, they're called junk trucks that have odometers with over 1 million kilometers. Obviously, this has a lot of maintenance problems. And in the region here, there's also a bit of a lack of enforcement around advanced braking systems such as ABS and ESP. You have a couple of other reasons like overweight loading and obviously the poor road infrastructure, right? Relative to Europe and the US, obviously, we're not the most advanced there. So when you think about how we want to tackle that, and I think we're part of the solution, you have to think about the long term and the short term, right? In the long term, and obviously the most impactful, and NICE is definitely going to address that, is on the government side. So you have driver hour bans that are happening in Europe, so they don't allow anyone to drive for more than X number of hours per day. They have a minimum allowable year for some of these trucks, so you can't have one that has failure in some of these mechanics of the vehicle itself. Enforced heavier fines on overweight loading, and then obviously there's tons of investment happening in the road infrastructure throughout some of these other companies, some of these other countries. And if you think about the other long-term one, which I'm sure Carl is going to address, and Gary as well, is the autonomous vehicle end of the spectrum. So 90% of these accidents that happen actually happen due to human errors. So obviously having autonomous vehicles will substantially drop these accident rates. And if you think about the companies like Waymo, Tesla, Otto, that was also a part of Uber at some point in time, and some of these big auto manufacturers such as GM, Daimler, and Volvo, all of these guys are working on autonomous trucks. But I think the part where we come in, and this is where we had the founding white paper very clearly highlighting that, is how can Shell actually make sure that we can alleviate the safety standards. And look, so we have more than 20,000 trucks registered on our platform, and they log in every single day trying to book a load of any of the 300 plus shippers that we have.
Oh, okay, and I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's a big number actually.
Yeah, and that's across the 3 core markets that we operate. And now when you think about that number, so now we'd like to think that we have some influence over these carriers. So whether that's through telematics, which is basically us using their phones to monitor the speed, harsh brakes, excessive acceleration, so on.
I'll be asking you about the method, how we implement such rules, how do you reach such goals? But let me just move to harsh right now, because this is exactly how we were discussing this earlier before we started the event, officially started the event actually. When Hyperloop comes to mind, when Hyperloop is a word being heard nowadays for the general audience, it means the future. So you're actually working on a white paper. You're using a white paper. You're introducing a whole new concept. Can you help us understand this concept? Can you help our general audience understand this concept, Harj?
Absolutely. First of all, I think the easiest way to understand the concept is to imagine an integration of a number of technologies coming together. This is space, aerospace, and high-speed rail, and it's a combination of all of those. We as a company were only founded in 2014, and in 2017 we conducted some of our first ever trials and full-scale tests at our facility just outside Las Vegas. So we have a full-scale test facility, which we call DevLoop, which is about ½ kilometer long, which enabled us to do a number of things. First of all, it actually proved that magnetic levitation in a vacuum environment worked. Secondly, it then allowed us to introduce a full-scale test vehicle, which we called XP1, in 2017. And from 2017 to the end of 2017, we did about 400 tests, reaching speeds of just shy of 400 kilometers an hour in a ½ kilometer facility. Since then, since 2017 to 2019, what we've been doing is actually developing that technology even further to the next level. So the technology is evolving at a rapid pace. That sort of showcase, and what we did last year, back end of 2020, November the 8th, was then showcased the first human passenger journeys on a Hyperloop system. So I think what we have done in the very short space of time with the brilliant engineers and technologists that we've got in Los Angeles is to prove to the world that this technology is no longer a white paper. Actually, we've gone a long lot further than that. In addition to that, we wouldn't have done and progressed without the support of our investors, without the support of our board, and the capital that's been raised, and that's shy of $700 million. So the technology is now started to actually gain a lot of traction, not only with our investors, with ourselves, but more importantly, it started to gain traction around the world, specifically in the US, here in the Middle East, and also across in India. I mean, you know, where are we? So I've just explained where we are with respect to the technology. where I am now is that we are now trying to move forward, commercialize that technology so that we engage with the authorities and to start looking at pilots and demonstrators that we can actually utilize the technology and roll it out. And importantly, and this is the whole debate today, and the basis of our talk today is safety. And we, in addition to all of the technology development, have been working hand in glove with a lot of the regulators and safety authorities around the globe. That's in the US with the Department of Transport and the FRA. It's across here in the Middle East, in fact, with the TGA and the MOT over in KSA. More importantly, we've also done it here in the UAE as well with the RTA, and across in India with the Principal Scientific Advisor and Niti Aayog, which is the technology think tank for the government of India. So regulation, safety, technology, commercial, and rollout of the technology is exactly what we've been doing in a very, very structured manner. And I think that's a very important point.
From this point at the present that Taj just explained with Hyperloop, I would like to go to Gary, and I would like to just take this a second and remind all our general public audience, if they would like to type the questions in the text box on the screens. We will be more than happy to receive the questions, and we encourage them to engage more. Definitely, they would have better questions than my questions are. I would go to Gary. Gary, I think it was late 90s, early 2000s, when car commercials in the United States started to tell everybody about the Onstar option. This is the option of these days that you must have in your car for safety. Where are Onstar services right now? And on a quicker note as well, we'll be discussing it further, but is Onstar in the United States different than the Onstar in the United Kingdom, in UAE, and maybe soon in Egypt? How does it differ regionally nowadays?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me here and talking about such an important subject. Safety has been something that's been at the core of our company since we began. And if you look at the innovations and technologies that we have created, from airbags to crash testing processes, etc., even up to Onstar, when we launched that in the United States in 1996, safety and helping reduce accidents has been a key focus. We see more change in our industry in the next 5 to 10 years than in the next 50. And the reason for that is the convergence of technology. So back in 1996, we launched the brand Onstar, and the brand Onstar is absolutely focused on road safety. We work hand in glove, day to day, 24/7 across all of the markets that we have launched in with the emergency services. And we combine in-car technology with a human touch. We have trained advisors who are there to interact with public service answering points, the emergency services, as well as to offer triage abilities to our customers around the world. So when we start expanding into other markets, then the core focus has to be for us looking at safety and delivering peace of mind. I'm really excited to say that we are just about to bring these services to the GCC. We're going to imminently launch the services in the UAE and then select markets around the GCC. And these technologies help save lives. As we heard earlier on, about 1.3 million fatalities on the road every year. 13,000 of those are here in the GCC. So we're working very closely with the emergency services, with the regulators, to be able to bring these services and this technology to help save lives in the region.
It was on purpose that I wanted to listen to Naif last, because Now, if you've heard Hyperloop plans, you've heard about the GM OnStar, why are we here from Uber, the trucking, the infrastructure of the roads and the future of the infrastructure of roads. You're the public official here. What do you make of all these ideas that we're discussing right now? As a public official, at one point, you have your concerns, there are decisions to be made, and people's lives depend on it. Naif.
Okay. No?
That's much better. Okay, go ahead.
Excellent. And I'll just repeat what I said. I said I'm very happy to be among my colleagues, respected speakers, and before all the excellent and nice audience to represent the government side of the story. We look at safety as a very essential component with all modes of transportation. Plus, we admire technology because technology has proven the contribution of safety. It's a cooperation and collaborative action between government and private sector. Before, it used to be government applies the rules without sitting with the private sector. Now, this behavior has changed. We have open doors, open-minded for technology to amend or make laws for transportation. Plus, we encourage and boost technology to be our main drive for transportation. Smart mobility has proven, as I said, that we have accomplished many targets of safety on, let's say, deaths and major accidents and road constructions and infrastructure. This is one. Secondly, when we do laws, it's not enough to do only law and throw it and just watch magic happen or people abide to it. No. What we do is the process of making law here, we sit with private sectors, our partners. We study the law, we float it, take the comments, valuable comments of major stakeholders, and then we make an awareness campaigns to all stakeholders, beneficiaries, service providers, everybody, including all the safety things that we need to stress on. And then we enforce. We start implementing our enforcement plans. All this behavior, when we changed it, has give us a tremendous numbers. 2020, we have reduced the death on the road to 20%, almost 20%, compared to other years. So, as I said, we are in a one boat with the private sector. We encourage technology. So this is the things that we have done so far.
Actually, I'm going to even when we're done with the session, I will start using the term collisions instead of the term of accidents. But speaking of safety, just as Rebecca and every one of you guys were saying right now, this is a question that I would just share with everybody. And I would like to start with Harj, actually. Is it a big difference when we speak or discuss safety for public transportation and safety on an individual transportation, method of transportation, be it an Uber, be it a car that I use and it has a certain level of autonomous driving? Is it a different concept from mass transportation?
I think that's a great question. My view would be safety is safety. Whether it's private, individual cases, or whether it's mass. Ultimately, I think there is a cost to it all. Safety, even if you put it into context, if it's a motor vehicle, for example, it's still on public infrastructure, it's still in the public domain. So as far as I'm concerned, safety in any kind of transportation carries the same weight.
Involves everybody.
Okay? Yeah. Involves everyone, absolutely right. I think transport and it's public, as far as I'm concerned, it's public, okay? So I think if you use that concept, I think what you do is create a level playing field. Complexities really are a different question, I think, because I think if you start looking at the technology that we use and you look at the technologies in autonomous cars, yeah, where autonomous cars, I mean, I use the analogy, very smart technology vehicles, autonomous vehicles on very dumb infrastructure, a highway. The highway doesn't have anything on it.
And that's many cars concerned right now.
Right, and exactly. Whereas when you start looking at a Hyperloop, we are in a very closed environment. In fact, nothing can go in it. So, from a certain safety perspective, we've taken out a huge equation. A lot of variables are removed. So when we are traveling at the speeds we intend to travel, using autonomous technologies between our vehicles and pods, we don't have to think about all the variables from weather to people to other vehicles to all the various different scenarios that I think an autonomous car has to. So I think, there are very different scenarios. However, I think everybody should be considering safety on the same platform. It is in the public interest.
Carl, that's a question that definitely you might be asking yourself if you're not in Dirk, in your business. Can I entrust me or my family? Can I entrust myself and the safety of my family to an AI managed system of transportation?
I mean, that's a great question. I can guarantee you're not the only one in the general public that asks yourself that kind of question, whether, in any form that it is. We always, for us, it's a matter of standards. It's a matter of how well your system is performing. So every time we look at deploying a system, and very often we never deploy a system as a standalone system. We're always integrated with partners. We're always integrated with infrastructure providers, with the agency, the road owner, as well as the end user, mainly the car manufacturer and that whole value chain. We always look at the performance of our systems from a standard perspective, from an ecosystem perspective. What is, specifically when you're talking AI, there's a lot of prediction involved, there's a lot of inference involved, and then how accurate that inference is. And then how much better or worse can it perform than a human judgment, right? And this all comes with the development of more advanced technology, more advanced AI, and eventually we will never be deploying systems that are subpar or that will not bring any improvement to the overall experience, right? Whether it's an improvement in safety, of course, that's the primary goal, as well as an improvement in mobility and improvement in user experience. we're trying, we'll never be deploying a system that is not complying with the standards that either we set ourselves, but the industry sets itself as a group. So if you look at today, what's happening a lot in the AV and the connected and autonomous vehicle driving space is that whole industry is self-regulating and developing standards, developing regulations that, of course, advising the government also. So they're working hand in hand with the government on what type of standards will make that whole ecosystem. I'm not going to say technology because it's an ecosystem of technologies acceptable to the general public, and that's really how we look at it, and where we try really to yes, address the question of acceptability, social acceptability.
Well, I know that I have only 14 minutes to go before I start receiving the questions from our general public audience, and I really appreciate that their questions are already coming in. Please feel free to add comments or questions to the section ready for that. I want to ask Rebecca, and this is something that is in direct contact to the COVID-19 challenge the world is facing right now. Last time I took an Uber was last week, and I expected the guy to be having the mask, and I expected the driver to have alcohol spray around and stuff like that. But instead of one bottle, he had 3. Instead of a couple of the mask that he has, he offered me a brand new mask. What are the challenges that you, in your position at Uber, facing? What are the changes as well that you have witnessed in the past 9 months of COVID-19?
Yeah, well, and first I have to apologize because I know I'm getting 95% of the stream right now, which means you guys are probably getting 95% of me. So if I break up during my answer, I apologize. But I think, and I'm glad your story went the positive way, Sharif. I thought it might, you might have a complaint to share. But I think, safety has been a top priority at Uber since our new CEO, Dara, joined about 3 years ago. And we have a large dedicated team dedicated to building technology and enforcing policies and operationalizing new programs to both prevent and respond to different types of safety incidents. Now, before the pandemic, that was both of the road safety sort, so trying to prevent dangerous driving and collisions, while also preventing any conflicts that can happen inside the vehicle. When the pandemic started, we were able to then shift those resources and that expertise and that technology to addressing the pandemic. And how do we introduce features like mask detection for drivers or riders before they're requesting a ride or going online, for them to show that they are wearing a mask. And that points to one of the challenges that you may have been alluding to, is that we have a vast network of drivers and riders that all kind of behave on their own accord, and we don't have complete control over exactly what is in the vehicle. So that's where we rely on our technology and our policies to enforce that. And so a lot of that groundwork was already in place. If we get feedback from a rider or a driver about something that the other party did during a ride, we're able to provide that feedback to the other person, let them know and educate on behaving better in the future, and then have policies to enforce that over time. And so we were able to just kind of transfer that to the pandemic into mask wearing and cleaning your vehicle and things that are more pertain to health, safety, and hygiene as well. And that's, of our core business, but we are also able to use this as an opportunity when people are staying home to introduce new solutions that help people to stay at home as well. We have our Uber Eats business in many places around the world, but we were also able to introduce services like Uber Connect and Uber Direct, where you're able to deliver an item to a loved one or a family member, or get something delivered to you so that you're able to stop the spread and maintain that social distance. So I think all of those together are important for addressing this new pandemic that I don't think anyone thought they would have experience with dealing with in the technology world as of late.
Yeah. Ali, everybody, each of the participants right now, you're speaking on safety on a certain level of expertise. But when you deal through the company, through the application with 20,000 truck drivers on safety, do they stand on the same page? Does they really know your concerns and abide by the rules, or is that challenging for a company as young as yours as well?
Or I think it's also a very good question. I think it all comes down to incentives. Incentives are not very much aligned in the trucking industry, in the sense that these carriers struggle to make ends meet, regardless of the fact that they are actually the juggler of the economy. If you think about it, these are the ones that are moving everything around us, and they are at the absolute bottom of the food chain. So these guys have to drive for 12, 16 hours, and they spend weeks and weeks away from their friends and family,
and
kids.
And correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry to cut you here. Correct me if I'm wrong,
Sure.
because not everybody of the general audience and even our distinguished participants know that. But I think it's more than 80% of goods and merchandise, total of more than 80% of goods and merchandise moving in Egypt goes through big, heavy trucks, right?
So it's actually 95%, and then the rest of the 5% is distributed amongst air, ocean, and Nile, and that's just a very small portion. So trucking is massive, but the ones that are actually driving these trucks are the ones that we're not very much taking care of, and I think that's what we stand for as a company. And I think our goal is to do two things. One is change the perception by, first off, very much understanding what these guys feel and how we can actually help them make their lives a lot better, and accordingly build an incentive structure for them to work with us regularly, organically, feeling that they're a place that they can call home. And accordingly, when we ask them to do some specific things and follow some specific requirements, they understand that they have to adhere by it. And honestly, we've seen that over the past couple of months, and as we've grown the company a bit, these drivers automatically have an incentive to drive with us now, because we are a primary or a secondary source of income for them. So when we tell them, hey, we're monitoring your phone, we know that you've been speeding over that specific highway, please make sure that you don't go over that speed limit. Next time around, when they do it and we ban them, they feel, okay, you know what, we should have listened, right? So I think one is us tracking through telematics, looking at harsh brakes, excessive acceleration, so on and so forth. But the second piece is we're building a feature called Take Me Home, which is basically when drivers want to go home, instead of them having to find a trip that takes them home all over Egypt or Saudi or Pakistan, they can actually click on where their home's at, and then we find them a trip back home. So a lot of these things that we're trying to build and we're thinking through, like vehicle inspection requirements, random drug test administration, enforced driving hour limits, are ones that, one, will help them a lot, and then two, is just going to improve and alleviate the safety across. So we're doing our best, and we just hope that the perception changes and we actually do alleviate the safety concerns.
Gary, when you at GM team develop OnStar services and new editions of the OnStar, when you do that, do you put in mind what Carl just was talking about? Do you put in mind the infrastructure needed for the roads that the General Motor cars and users of OnStar will be using?
Yes, I mean, if you start thinking about the core of OnStar and what OnStar would also deliver for the future, it's connectivity. One thing that Ali was talking about was behavioral change. So technology can do a certain amount of things, but with that technology, you can then help drive behavioral change through gamification, through awareness, through knowledge. And some of the things Ali mentioned are exactly what we have built in and will continue to build into the OnStar services. So delivering additional value to the customer, delivering additional safety, but also looking to see how we, through that technology, can deliver behavioral change. So Ali mentioned the point of heavy braking or hard accelerations, yes, driving at night, etc. All things amongst many other data points that you can start to identify a particular behavioral style of a driver, which then could lead to a potential collision. So those things I think are important. what it does mean also is ensuring that the subscriber, Onstar is a subscription service, also sees value in that. And so other areas of the business that we're expanding to is looking to offer insurance, Onstar insurance, as an example. So using some of the data points with the agreement of the subscriber, we're actually able to drive down the cost of the insurance premium. So there's value all around. There's behavioural change, and that reduces collisions on the road. So yes, I mean, when we're looking to launch in the region, as I've said, we've worked for many years with the regulators, with the telecoms authorities to ensure that we've got the right infrastructure for launch in the region.
Naif, we've been just listening to Gary right here and speaking about the services and the subscription paid for the services. In your perception, again, referring to your expertise, because you deal with people on the ground and you deal with your partners from the private sector, but again, it depends on the behavioral change. Do you think Saudi citizens would be prepared to pay more for more safety or not? This is a question that we ask ourselves here in Egypt. This is a question we ask ourselves in all the societies. As a citizen, do you think we are prepared to pay more for safety or not?
I wouldn't mention I wouldn't say pay for safety, but would they cooperate with safety? Would they support any efforts of safety? I would say yes, with a lot of resources from their sides. I would stress on what Ali, Rebecca, Gary said on safety and technology and the behavior. How the behavior is a main component on this process. From our field surveys that we've do for for educational series, we have found 85 to 90% of all the let's say incidents that we see on the road are coming from a lack of knowledge or lack of safety from the driver himself. So whatever we do with our technology, and if there is no educated and like a strict driver to rules, we will never do any good results on safety. However, so going back to the main focus on the drivers, yes, technology and monitoring the behavior of the driver is very important. It gives results. It's the hanging fruit of safety efforts.
Yes.
So,
Carl, when we're speaking about connectivity, a whole ecosystem of roads and cars that are connected, what are the barriers right now? I think from on top of my mind, it would be the different kind of advancement and capabilities that you have in each and every country. But what are the common barriers right now for establishing such an ecosystem of connectivity between the driver, the car, and the road?
That's actually a great question, and it's a question that has been debated greatly in the past few years and specifically months. And we're talking mainly from two perspectives, the US and the European perspective. And China is also a big market that has adopted connectivity at a widespread scale. But the idea again is standardization. That's the first step. And as I said, the Society for Automotive Engineering in the US has come together to define what connectivity has to look like. And so this is the first step, I would say. For the same thing happened with the ETSI standards in Europe. However, there are two main barriers to that. How do you achieve scale in the vehicle fleet and all the different basically renewal of that fleet of vehicles that needs to now you need to roll out vehicles that are connected. And the second one is rolling out connected infrastructure, which is a completely other issue, because now it involves also working with agencies, road owners and operators with different jurisdictions, whether when you're talking city, municipal, county, state level, federal level, specifically in the US. And that brings in kind of its own layer of complexity. So, and to kind of go back on these two topics, when we're talking vehicles, the auto manufacturers are a step ahead. They are already deploying a lot of technology when it comes to connectivity. Not necessarily what you call V2X, the vehicle to everything connectivity. It's still not widespread. That's the point-to-point technology that's going to enable cars to communicate with each other. But if you're thinking 5G, that's a big promise right now for vehicles, and this is where you're seeing a lot of funds going into developing the connected car. So Ford, GM, and a lot of other OEMs in the US have already deployed cars that are highly connected. Tesla is a big one of them, and have already deployed features for the connected car, whether it's over-the-air updates, whether it is mapping and even pushing some content to the vehicle. We're seeing all of that already being adopted. On the infrastructure side, it's as I said, a much slower process. It's a process that involves a lot of capital expenditures from an agency, from a government perspective, and we know how that can be slow. However, here again, you have a few enabling technologies, and that's why I was saying in the past few months, there's a big shift where the market or the regulators have chosen to move away from legacy Wi-Fi-based technology to cellular-based technology. And this hopefully is going to really help that market explode and kind of close that loop where you're seeing cellular-enabled vehicles with cellular-enabled infrastructure and the application providers such as ourselves that are kind of closing that loop, making sure that everybody's interconnected and communicating.
This is not a question, actually. This is, I would like to follow a dialogue between Harj and Naif. Naif is the public official. He's responsible for meeting the partners from the private sector, discussing new ideas and stuff like that. What if now we are following a meeting that was set between Harj and Naif? What would Naif be concerned to know from Harj, and what would Harj be concerned to reach with Naif? Let's start with Naif talking to Harj.
This is a tough question.
That's a future. That's a future thing, and let's rehearse for the future cooperation.
Yeah, let's do a demo for the audience. Well, yeah, it goes the other way around. We hear the private sector. We assess the ideas. We assess the technology mainly on two streams: economically and surface-wise. Like, is this surface going to be to add value to the chain of public transportation? Is this going to be lucrative and success business before we even do a law? But Mr. Harj would do more like into creating an...
So Harj is visiting Riyadh, and he has an appointment with you, and the floor is yours, Harj.
I think that's, again, a very good question and great question. I think Nate's right. I mean, at the end of the day, everything that we are doing needs to add value, needs to have a bigger, wider socioeconomic value add, because otherwise, what's the purpose, okay? When you are going to invest huge sums of money that will probably take. So first of all, is there a fit? Does it actually fit with the agenda and the strategy for the state? Second thing then is from our perspective is, I think the key thing, and I think a lot of the panelists will agree with me here, is to make sure that when we are introducing new technologies, we don't shackle it with perceptions from the past. And what I mean by that is public transport in particular, and mass transport, is very, very prescriptive. By nature, it's a very conservative environment. So when you are developing new technologies, there is a fine balance between, utilizing what we've learned from the past, which we should. We're not saying at all we don't. Of course we should, but at the same time, to enable innovation to proceed at a pace that enables investment to continue. Okay. Now, that means to say that you would probably take more of a risk-based approach to safety. You would probably look at a combination of what we would say is risk-based to performance-based. And I think it's a combination of the two, performance and risk-based, possibly attached to some of the prescription that we may need. But I think just purely running on a prescriptive basis would mean that for years, you could get bogged down in regulatory standards development, which would actually, well, you would literally run out of steam as a new start of a new technology. You need to continue to make progress. And I think there is an obligation on authorities, transport authorities, to work hand in glove. And I think if you take a practicable approach, and I think again in safety terms, I think that term practicable should be at the fore. And I think that will actually enable us to then work and develop and then deliver what Nate has just said. And that is the value add to the economy as a whole, and the ability to be able to improve the environment and provide opportunity.
I'll have to cut myself here and go ahead, Naif, if you have a final remark, because I'll be moving to the questions from the general audience.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Quick addition to what Mr. Haj said, that we have met and seen thousands of ideas, throughout the last two years. And some of them were already invested in, and some of them were scratched. Like, let's say, majority has failed due to some of the components that he has to take into account before even start or invest in any of these. So my recommendation and these ideas is to be discussed with the experts before you go further. So you get the concept, and then you customize it on a paper work, discuss with the experts.
I think that's right.
Okay.
And I think just putting the framework in place. I mean, I'll give you an example. If you look at what's happening in the US with the Department of Transport, they produced a document. In fact, they formed the NET Council, the New Emerging Transportation Technologies Council, which had a remit to develop pathways to regulation for new emerging transport technologies. It's those sort of approaches that are enabling technologies like ours to actually get some kind of framework around them, because it's important that we do get guidance. Very important that we get guidance as we move along, because the pace at which we're developing the technology is fairly rapid. So I think the ability to be able to work with autonomous technologies, Hyperloop technologies like ours and other technologies is, I think it's essential.
So I'll make room now for the questions coming in from the public audience and the general audience who's been following us right now. I would start with Gary, actually, because Gary spoke of the behavior changes. And if I'm looking down, everybody who's following me right now, so I'm looking to my iPad, I'm receiving the questions online right away. So my question, it's not my question, actually, one of our audience is asking Gary, what do you think are the most effective ways in tech to influence the behavior of drivers to drive more safely?
One would be—
Can technology provide such thing?
For sure, for sure. So one would be awareness. We all think we're great drivers, right? Until there's a collision. And so one would be awareness. That awareness comes from data over a period of time. And we build into our technologies and the app, as an example, that we have, that type of technology, that behavioral tracking, that gamification. So it's not just data. You can actually compare yourself to your peers, your friends, and make it something that is really engaging. And then, as I mentioned, that engagement also could add value to you as a customer too. So I think the key thing is data and bringing that awareness to the customer. They then can make that decision as to what they need to do in terms of becoming a better driver, if that's what the case is.
A question for Naif, actually. Naif, you've mentioned 20% decrease in accidents, or were you speaking of accidents, or were you speaking of life-threatening accidents, the 20% decrease last year? And how was that achieved, and how much is that worth?
Well, we're speaking of deaths, number of deaths.
Number of deaths, okay.
Yeah.
So it's down 20% than last year.
Down 20% with the efforts of all, like a committee of all.
Was that 100% enforcement or technologically assisted?
Well, it was enforcement, technology enforcement to adjust the behavior of the drivers.
Okay, great. The question for Rebecca, and it's a question from a fellow citizen here in Cairo, apparently, because he's asking that Uber usually uses the email in case of any complaint and stuff like that, and incidents, on-road incidents. Aren't you considering to develop a new tool? Because users of Uber think that they need a more instant, a more time-sensitive tool to be able to communicate with Uber in case of such incidents.
Yeah, that has actually been a big focus of things that we've introduced recently. And even 3 years ago, what we did is we put safety on the map in both the rider and driver apps. So you'll see a safety shield when you're on a ride, and that gives you access to your safety toolkit where you can see various tools, and it ranges from just consuming safety education to sharing your trip location with friends and family so they know where you are, to actually contacting emergency assistance. And so we have a way for you to contact authorities, and in some locations that actually shares your real-time location with the authorities as well. But that's all user generated, and I think what we've focused on in more recent times is how can we be more proactive about that help. And so we've developed, using a lot of the telematics tools that have already been talked about today, can we detect anomalies on a ride if it's been stopped for too long, or if we detect a high impact event that could be a collision, then we actually reach out to the rider and driver from Uber, and we ask, is everything okay? And through that, we're able to then give them access to the tools, get them in contact with the right authorities, and talk them through a situation as well. So I think
that's the focus has been, let's be smarter about our interactions here and do that proactively rather than waiting for someone to reach out to us.
Another question for Rebecca, and actually, again, it's from one of Egyptian followers here, because he's asking you, what do you think about the new initiative by the Egyptian government regarding replacing very old fuel-run vehicles with natural gas ones? How does that impact your business? Does it impact your business or not?
Yeah, I think we recognize that, putting more cars on the road is something that Uber has done. And so we need to, as we move forward, be doing this in a eco-conscious way. And so in many parts of the world, we really started with this in more of our European markets, but incentivizing more green vehicles so that there are benefits for drivers to start to drive a more eco-friendly vehicle and change that over time. We realize switching your car is not a quick decision or an easy investment. So there need to be incentives, and this is going to happen over a longer period, but we're fully supportive of any efforts that help us get to less of a footprint from that perspective.
Ali, do you think technology can overcome all transport safety challenges, or some safety challenges require human action and awareness more than technology?
Yeah, so to me, I think just on the behavior change piece, it's threefold that we need to kind of take a look at. One is the education, the second is the experience, and then the third is the engagement. And a lot of these things can happen through technology, but the one thing that cannot happen through technology only is a lot of these things that the government controls, such as the road infrastructure, a lot of the hardware, a lot of the infrastructure of the ports that we operate. Some of these things cannot change through technology today, and it will require a lot of physical, manual, a very deliberate effort to change around. So I wouldn't say technology is the solution of everything. It definitely plays a big role. It's a big enabler, but it's not the only way we can solve the problem, specifically on the safety side.
Yeah. Carl, there's a question here for you in regards to how to minimize crashes on the road. How can a smart road, a smart city or smart town help minimize such accidents?
I mean, that's a great question, and that's our whole reason for being, right? So that's why Dirk has been founded, and just to kind of start, traditionally, infrastructure owners, road owners, have looked at road safety to solve or to go around human behavior. So how do you shape human behavior? How do you mitigate that human behavior, either through enforcement, through education too, or through trying to influence road design through safety analysis and so on and so forth. And one way to move away from that mindset, and not saying that we have to completely change, but at least start introducing technology into how we influence safety and how we work or mitigate for driver behavior, is by introducing these smart technologies that we're developing. And it's really kind of, if you look at an autonomous vehicle and why it was developed to eliminate that driver behavior aspect from the whole experience, right? So the idea is, how do we perceive the surrounding of a car, and how do we navigate that car better? And it's what you call in technical terms the perception and the planning of the vehicle. So what we thought at Dirk is, how do you port all of that technology that's been developed for so long in the autonomous driving space, and how do you bring it to infrastructure and support that objective to reduce road safety? And it's that idea of being able to perceive human behavior, driver behavior, understand what the root cause of crashes are, and how we're able to provide information to the ecosystem in order to mitigate mitigate safety hazards. And it's really two ways. So today, the way we do it at Dirk is collect as much information as possible to be able to learn how road users are behaving, recognizing patterns, recognizing violating behaviors, recognizing what we call a near miss or near collision, which is very often more valuable than a collision itself. Very often, road authorities will rely on crash reports, which are very data poor, and we're trying to provide them with much richer information through the sensor, the infrastructure sensor analytics that we deploy. So we look at cameras, all these cameras that are being deployed today on the roads. How can we extract more data? How can we extract more intelligence from those, and then provide more information to the road agency and such as NIF, and then help them be much more proactive in their decision making. So help them make much more informed decisions, much better informed decisions. That's the first aspect of it. The second aspect, moving away from that, trying to mitigate road user or driver behavior, to trying to eliminate it fully with autonomy, right? And this is the next step, is how do you now use infrastructure data and sensor data to feed real-time information to the autonomous car and make it and improve the whole autonomy of the vehicle. So how do you develop complementary technologies to the vehicle itself for it to be able to be even more, have a better performance in terms of autonomy and therefore fulfill its primary objectives of being safer and being a better experience overall, providing a better experience for the rider. And this is where we are working with some of the top US and Japanese OEMs and parts manufacturers and infrastructure providers such as Siemens and Bosch, and are developing these smart infrastructure systems to be able to feed them as much real-time information using camera, using LiDAR, using radar to the autonomous cars.
Gary, there's a question from an old traditional GM brand owner, and he's saying that, does it have to come with a price, safety, advanced safety systems and technologies? Do I have to buy a new car? Can you help customers who own older GM branded vehicles feel safe on the roads?
That's a really good question. Apologies, I was on mute. So we have literally just launched in the United States some technologies for our customers who may not be driving a connected vehicle right now. So if you think about a connected car, you think about Onstar and the technologies that we're going to be launching here very soon in the GCC. That's embedded technology. So we'll be offering that technology across the brands that we sell here, Cadillac, GMC, and Chevrolet. But you know, safety, as the customer just mentioned, is important to everybody. So we've created a specific technology, an app that is based around our OnStar service. So it uses all of our backend, our human specially trained advisors, our relationships with the public service answering points, the emergency services, to deliver that safety, whether you're driving a GM car or even a non-GM car. So yes, we're looking at many different technologies that we can broaden our OnStar services, not just for our own brands, for other competitor OEM brands as well.
Harj, how Egypt can apply the Hyperloop technology?
Look, I think
too crowded.
Egypt can apply.
You have to think before you start.
Well,
it's too crowded, man.
Well, the bit I haven't touched on is cargo. Okay, we've focused very much, I think, and I think people tend to associate Hyperloop technology with passengers, but yet there is a massive market for cargo and logistics, and probably the first area of sort of early use for our technology. And when we consider where we are with cargo and logistics, cargo logistics, or logistics itself, is worth $4 trillion annually. And or global freight is worth $4 trillion. And that was 2020 figures. And I think that figure was prior to COVID kicking in. And when we then start looking at express freight and the fact that that's going to grow fourfold in the next decade, it's worth 516 billion at the moment. I think my view would be that there is a huge, and when we consider geographically where Egypt is, the ability to increase capacity without actually having to carry out a huge amount of physical works, and the connectivity between the Gulf and into the Mediterranean, I think Egypt's got a huge part to play. So I think, when we consider some of our biggest investors, our biggest investor already runs and operates ports, the ability to be able to, first of all, focus, I think my view on Egypt would be to look at the cargo opportunity, to be able to look at the ports in the Suez zone, free zones, and see how those ports can actually be linked and connected to actually make them much more efficient. So I think there's huge opportunities, let alone the passenger side. And I think you're absolutely right. But I think, as a startup company, we have, a limited bandwidth. We're focused on certain regions, and I think we'd like to get some traction. And as soon as we get that traction, I'm sure that, we came here with a vision into the Gulf, and that was for a connected Gulf, no major city more than an hour apart. So we still maintain that vision, and I think it'd be interesting to see what opportunities do arise as we move forward.
That's a question for Naif from a public transport standpoint. How can governments in the Gulf especially balance the budgets, which is a difficult task nowadays with the era of low oil prices? How can you work to develop mass transit mobility solutions, meet the long-term needs with pressured or strained budgets?
Well, let me just say something.
Go ahead, sir.
All master plans are done prior any implementation, and then all the projects that are approved will be budgeted for. So budget will be allocated regardless, will be allocated with the decision. So it's a main factor of the decision. There's no budget, we will not approve it, so to go implement it. However,
studies and figures are determined already.
Exactly.
That's what you're saying.
So all these projects that are going on now, like roads, metros, trains, stations, are already budgeted for. So regardless of price, oil price, irrelative.
The other question now is for Rebecca. And Rebecca, this question is actually highlighting a matter of privacy. Adding all the sensors and making the driver feel like he's over-monitored and continuously tracked, how do you overcome such change the people's management issue?
Yeah, I think it's something that we talk about all the time. So it's a great question. I think I mentioned this earlier, but the drivers that earn on the Uber platform, they are their own, they're independent contractors. So they purchase their own vehicle, they purchase any tools that they're using to drive, whether that's a phone mount to put their phone on the dash or a dash cam in that regard. So they want to maintain their own privacy as well. They don't want Uber monitoring their rides in any way. But we know that there's also a greater good that we are all aiming towards, which is reducing the safety incidents. And so we often work with privacy advocates, so external organizations, to figure out how can we do this in a way where we are serving our safety goals, but also being privacy conscious. And I think one example of that is in a audio recording feature that we have been testing in some parts of the world. And that allows both the rider and driver to record the ride if they start to feel uncomfortable, so they have a source of truth of what happened after the fact. But we worked with external organizations to figure out what's the best way to do this, so we're not just adding more surveillance to the world. And the way that we came up with this is both the rider and driver can record, but they don't have access to the recording, so they can't play it back or publicize it or post it on social media or anything of that sort. All they can do is report an incident to Uber and share that audio with us. And until they share that audio with us, we don't actually have any access to that recording. So I think that's just one example, and it's not particularly a telematics example of looking at the sensors of a phone, but it's a way that we can think of how can we balance both our safety goals and privacy goals, and they need to go hand in hand, because we need to make sure that people don't feel, that Uber is big brother over their rides, but also that Uber is looking out for them and will know when something goes wrong. So it's a double-edged sword.
That's a question for Ali. When it comes to logistics, Ali, what are the last mile solutions you think and you see coming at the fore of 2021?
Yeah, so I think very good question. So last mile is growing massively. So post-COVID, everyone wants to stay home. Everyone's shopping now. Amazon has discounts every single day, so it's quite lucrative to shop online. So I think last mile delivery companies are coming up right, left, and center. Every couple of days, you have a company that's doing last mile delivery, and that only says just how big the demand is for e-commerce specifically. But I think there are so many different aspects to last mile as well. You have companies that are in the wholesale last mile, such as Maxep, such as Capter, such as Fatura, the ones that are doing wholesale last mile just for e-commerce, for wholesalers and retailers. So you have a bunch that's coming up. I think in more advanced infrastructures such as Europe and the US, you have drone delivery that's coming up as well. So I think a lot of exciting stuff happening on the last mile side, and I think this is where it becomes very interesting, where data comes into play, and a lot of this data gets fed from a lot of these big e-commerce players into a lot of these logistics players, and the integration happens. And when the integration happens, it becomes a much smoother experience than it was before, where there was a lot of fragmentation between the actual seller and the logistics company. Today, they're pretty much just one full stack, providing the actual sales and the actual logistics. So last mile is actually one of the most exciting and one of the fastest growing segments right now across the globe. Obviously, COVID catalyzed it, but I can only see it growing over the next couple of years.
Well, that's a question for Harj, but I would actually as well listen to Gary after listening for Harj. Harj, what is the main challenge facing the spread of your Hyperloop technology, especially in MENA? And let me add, does the legislation slows Hyperloop down, or the technology slows Hyperloop down?
Look, so first of all, what's preventing us rolling out our technology in the MENA region? And then I think it's a combination. Look, I think development of technology and commercialization and build out go hand in hand. But first of all, you've got to get the technology right. You've got to be able to get the technology to a point where you can actually then start working with the authorities. So I think for us, our real focus right now is the technology. I think then secondly, I think technology goes hand in hand with investment. And I think, at the end of the day, that's the lifeblood to any startup, to any technology. And I'm sure all the panelists here have experienced the same pain as we do. So I think what we need to do is get enough investment. We need to be able to get that targeted towards the technology development. That technology develops, then what we'll do is we'll roll out in a bite-sized chunk approach, working with authorities and governments in the MENA region. And I think that probably is the way that we will go.
Okay. Gary, that's a question from a GM standpoint, actually. You have the technology, you have you have your concept cars, and you have the science and the technology back at your headquarters being developed already. Does it slow you down? Does the legislation slow you down, or the humans accepting the technology slows you down? And that's a very quick question.
That's a great question. If you think about the technology stacks that we're working on, our mission is to deliver a world of zero accidents, zero emissions, and zero congestion. A lot of what we've talked about today is about Onstar and our safety brand and what we're doing, but there are other technologies relating to electrification, as an example, and last mile delivery with an initiative called BrightDrop that we announced at CES just a week or so ago. And then there's autonomous technologies as well. So level 4, level 5 autonomous technologies where you don't need the steering wheel, you don't need the brake pedals. So it's fully driven by machine learning and AI. So I think it really depends on what types of technologies, where the country is in terms of its regulatory review. What I can say is when I look at the regulatory landscape here, certainly in the GCC and certainly in the Kingdom, as well as in the UAE, it's rapidly evolving with regards to mobility. So both governments are working incredibly hard to understand the technology, to ensure that it's safe, but also ensure that they can move fast as well. So there's that delicate balance between the two. So I think when you start looking at the broad scope, it's a balance of both the awareness and education and the acceptance of new technologies from a consumer's point of view, but also working with the governments in terms of all the great technologies that we're working on. We've also heard today during the web call.
Rebecca, that's the final question for you, and it's also about the future. What are the 2021 safety plans in Uber? Will it witness more developments?
Of course, always more development. I think, when it comes to safety, we don't have a lack of ideas. It's just a matter of prioritization and what is most important at that time. And as we all saw in 2020, we had to shift our resources to focusing a bit more on health safety. But during this time, we've seen actually surprising statistics around the increase in road traffic deaths, because there are less cars on the road and people are more likely to speed and break the law if there's not traffic stopping them from doing so. So I think that going into this next year, that brings up the importance of solving dangerous driving and road safety incidents once again. Once the world starts to open up again, we will start to see the kind of interpersonal conflicts emerge once more people are out and about. But that is all with a lens now for health safety, because we think that everyone is going to have a different risk tolerance when it comes to leaving the house and knowing what the cleanliness or policies and protocols are of the transportation option that they're choosing, whether that's mass transit or ride sharing or their own personal vehicle. So having that lens on everything that we do moving forward. And a lot of the new technologies have already been talked about today: connected cars, telematics. We as Uber, fundamentally, we develop an app that is used on rider and driver phones and uses to connect people and then get them from point A to point B. We can only do so much with an application. There's sensors in your phone that we can look at to understand if there is a harsh brake, if you're taking a corner too quickly. But the way your phone is mounted, the quality of the sensors of your phone, the bumps in the road can all have an impact on the quality of those sensors. And so if we're able to expand into these other technologies that have been mentioned, that only improves our ability to act, and especially act in real time. So not just after the fact and showing a driver what their behavior has been, but having real-time distraction alerts or ADAS systems and forward collision warnings, things of that nature. So these are all things that we will be moving towards in the new year.
Well, I have to wrap up here. It's really great. It was really great for me to be able to join you. I thought I would be just a moderator for an event, but I was really involved in interested. I hope that was the same. I'm sure that will be the same impression for everybody who is following us from the general public audience. Rebecca, Ali, Gary, Harj, Naif, Carl, thank you very much for being part of the first inaugural panel of Uber's Ignite. Thank you very much for your contribution and your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And